Okay, how's it going, everybody? So we're going to read. Let's see. This is written by Marx and Engels. This is the fictitious splits in the International Working Men's Association. Opening of Marx and Engels' preparations for confrontation with Bakunin's forces at upcoming IWMA Congress at The Hague. This is what this says here. So I'm not sure who's talking here in each one of these, but we'll see them anyway. And so we're going to go ahead and get into this, and I'm read the first part of this. Until now, the General Council has completely refrained from any interference in the International's internal squabbles and has never replied publicly to the overt attacks launched against it during more than 2 years by some members of the associations. But if the persistent efforts of certain meddlers to deliberately maintain confusion between the International and a society, the International Alliance of Socialist Democracy, which has been hostile to it since its inception, allowed the General Council to maintain this reserve, the support which European reaction finds in the scandals provoked by that society at a time when the International is undergoing the most serious trial since its foundation obliges it to present a historical review of all these intrigues. So we're going to read this first part here. 1. After the fall of the Paris Commune, the General Council's first act was to publish its address on the Civil War in France, in which it came out in support of all the Commune's acts, which at the moment served the bourgeoisie, the press, and all the governments of Europe as an excuse to heap the most vile slander on the vanquished Parisians. Within the working class itself, some still failed to realize that their cause was lost. The council came to understand the fact, among other things, by the resignation of 2 of its members, citizens Auger and Lucraff, who repudiated all support of the address. It may be said that the unity of views among the working class regarding the Paris events dates from the publication of the address in all the civilized countries. On the other hand, the International found a very powerful means of propaganda in the bourgeois press, and particularly in the leading English newspapers, which the address forced to engage in a polemic kept going by the General Council's replies. The arrival in London of numerous refugees from the Commune made it necessary for the General Council to constitute itself as a relief committee and function as such for more than 8 months, besides carrying on its regular duties. It goes without saying that the vanquished and exiles from the Commune had nothing to hope for from the bourgeoisie. As for the working class, the appeals for aid came at a different moment. Switzerland and Belgium had already received their contingent of refugees, whom they had either to support or send on to London. The funds collected in Germany, Austria, and Spain were sent to Switzerland. In England, the big fight for the 9-hour working day, the decisive battle of which was fought at Newcastle, had exhausted both the workers' individual contributions and the funds set up by the trade unions, which could be used, incidentally, according to the rules, only for labor conflicts. Meanwhile, by working diligently and sending out letters, the council managed to accumulate bit by bit the money which it distributed weekly. The American workers responded more generously to its appeal. It is unfortunate that the council could not avail itself of the millions which the terrified bourgeoisie believed the International to have amassed in its safes. In its safes. After May 1871, some of the Commune's refugees were asked to join the council, in which, as a result of the war, the French side was no longer represented. Among these new members were some old internationalists and a minority composed of men known for their revolutionary energy, whose election was an act of homage to the Paris Commune. Along with these preoccupations, the council had to prepare for the conference of delegates that it had just called. The violent measures taken by the Bonapartist government against the International had prevented the holding of the Congress at Paris, which had been provided for by a resolution of the Basel Congress, using the right conferred upon it by Article 4 of the Rules of the General Council, and its circular of July 12, 1870, convened the Congress at Mainz. In letters addressed at the same time to the various federations, it proposed that the General Council should transfer its seat from England to another country, and asked that delegates be provided with definite mandates to that effect. The federations unanimously insisted that it should remain in London. The Franco-Prussian War, which began a few days later, made it necessary to abandon any plans for convening the Congress. It was then that the federations which we consulted authorized us to fix the date of the next Congress, as we may be dictated by the political situation. As soon as the political situation permitted, the General Council called a private conference acting on the precedents of the 1865 conference and the private administrative meetings of each Congress. A public Congress was impossible and could only have resulted in the Continental delegates being denounced at a moment when European reaction was celebrating its orgies. When Jules Favre was demanding from all governments, even the British, the extradition of refugees as common criminals. When Dufour was proposing to the Royal Assembly a law banning the International, a hypocritical counterfeit of which was later presented by Malo to the Belgians. When in Switzerland, a commune refugee was put under preventative arrest while awaiting the federal government's decision on the extradition order. When hunting down members of the International was the ostensible basis for an alliance between Beust and Bismarck, whose anti-international clause Victor Emmanuel was quite eager to adopt. When the Spanish government, putting itself entirely at the disposal of the butchers of Versailles, was forcing the Madrid Federal Council to seek refuge in Portugal. At a time, lastly, when the International's prime duty was to strengthen its organization and to accept the gauntlet thrown down by the governments. All sections in regular contact with the General Council were invited in good time to be the conference, which, even though it was not be a public meeting, nevertheless faced serious difficulties in view of the internal situation. France was, of course, unable to elect any. The time was that of Naples. But just as it was about to nominate a delegate, it was broken up by the army. In Austria and Hungary, the most active members were imprisoned. In Germany, some of the more well-known members were prosecuted for the crime of high treason. Others landed in jail. And the party's funds were spent on aid to their families. The Americans, though they sent the conference a detailed memorandum on the situation of the International there, employed the delegation's money for maintaining the refugees. All federations, in fact, recognized the necessity of substituting the private conference for a public conference. After meeting in London from September 17th to 23rd, 1871, the conference authorized the General Council to publish its resolutions, to codify the administrative regulations, and publish them with the general rules, as reviewed and corrected in 3 languages, to carry out the resolution to replace membership cards with stamps, to reorganize the International in England, and lastly, to provide the necessary money for these various purposes. Following the publication of the conference proceedings, the reactionary press of Paris and Moscow, of London and New York denounced the resolution on working-class policy as containing such dangerous designs. The Times accused it of coolly calculated audacity that it would outlaw the International with all possible speed. On the other hand, the resolution that dealt a blow at the fraudulent sectarian sections gave the International Police a long-awaited excuse to start a noisy campaign, ostensibly for the unrestricted autonomy of the workers, whom it professed to protect against the despicable despotism of the General Council and the Conference. The working class felt itself so heavily oppressed, indeed, that the General Council received from Europe, America, Australia, and even the East Indies reports about the admission of new members and the formation of new sections. Okay. Yeah, so that's the fictitious splits in the International. Part 1. And we'll, how many parts they got in this? 7 parts. So yeah, we'll get into more parts here. Well, yeah, thank y'all for, tuning in. This is Marx Saw. You can follow me Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, Tumblr, Medium, all those. Hit me up there. Y'all have a great day, and Dodada Goy.